Sarah Mills stared at the empty walls of her new apartment. Boxes surrounded her, each one filled with fragments of her previous life. 2 months since the divorce papers were signed, and she still felt like she was treading water. The one-bedroom apartment was nothing like the sprawling suburban house she'd shared with Mark for 12 years, but it was hers. Completely hers. She unpacked a photo frame of her daughter, Emma, now away at college. Emma had been angry at first. Angry at her father for the affair. Angry at her mother for not fighting harder to save the marriage. Sarah had tried to explain that some things weren't worth saving, especially when they'd been broken for so long. "Mom, are you sure you're going to be okay?" Emma had asked during their last phone call. The concern in her voice made Sarah's chest tighten. "I'll be fine, honey. I'm actually looking forward to figuring out who I am without your dad." That wasn't entirely a lie. At 45, Sarah felt both terrified and strangely liberated. She'd married Mark right after college, built her identity around being his wife, Emma's mother, the perfect hostess at company parties. Now, she was just Sarah, whoever that was. Her phone buzzed with a text from her brother, Michael. "All moved in. Need any help?" Sarah smiled. Michael had been her rock through the divorce, showing up with pizza and wine on her worst nights, helping her find this apartment when she finally decided to leave. "Just finishing unpacking. I'm good, but thanks." She wasn't good, not really, but she needed to do this part alone. Her therapist had called it reclaiming her space. Sarah called it not wanting anyone to see her cry over where to put the coffee mugs. Monday morning came with an uncomfortable jolt. Sarah had taken a job at a local publishing house, a massive step down from her previous role at a marketing firm, but the marketing firm had been Mark's domain. Too many sympathetic glances, too many whispers when she walked into the break room. "You must be Sarah," a woman with bright red glasses and a pixie cut said, extending her hand. "I'm Diane, senior editor. Welcome to the chaos." The publishing house was smaller than she expected, just 20 employees crammed into an open office. Sarah's desk was by the window, looking out at a coffee shop across the street. She spent the morning trying to remember everyone's names, figuring out the filing system, and pretending she wasn't completely overwhelmed. During lunch, she sat alone until Diane plopped down across from her with a sandwich. "First days are the worst," Diane said, pushing a chocolate chip cookie toward her. "It gets better." Sarah wondered if Diane was talking about the job or life in general. Either way, she appreciated the gesture. The apartment was quiet when she returned that evening. Sarah opened a bottle of wine and stood on her small balcony, watching the city lights come on. In her old life, she'd be making dinner now, waiting for Mark to come home, asking about his day while silently wondering why she felt so empty despite having everything she thought she wanted. She pulled out her phone and called her daughter. "Hey, Mom. How was the first day?" "Different," Sarah said honestly. "But not bad different." "How's school?" They talked for 20 minutes about Emma's classes, her roommate drama, the party she was thinking about going to on Friday. Normal things that reminded Sarah that life went on, that Emma was okay despite everything. After hanging up, Sarah looked around the apartment again. The boxes were still everywhere, a physical reminder of the transition she was in. She picked one labeled kitchen and began unpacking plates she'd bought just last week. Her first solo shopping trip for household items in over a decade. She placed each plate in the cabinet, arranging them neatly. Then she noticed something. They were blue. She'd always bought white plates because Mark preferred them. But these were the color of the ocean on a clear day. Sarah hadn't even realized she'd chosen them for that reason. It was such a small thing, picking out plates in a color she liked. But standing there in her new kitchen, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the beginnings of her new life, it felt significant. She ran her fingers over the smooth ceramic edge of a blue plate and felt, for the first time in months, a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. Tomorrow, she'd unpack another box. The next day, another. She'd learn her coworkers' names. She'd figure out the quickest route to work. She'd call Emma more often. She'd keep going until one day, she wouldn't have to remind herself to breathe through the pain. Sarah put the plate back in the cabinet and closed the door. Starting over at 45 wasn't what she had planned. But maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what she needed. 2 months into her new job, Sarah found herself actually looking forward to Monday mornings. The publishing house had a comfortable rhythm to it. Manuscript deadlines, weekly meetings, lunch breaks with Diane, who had become something of a friend. It wasn't the career she'd planned, but there was satisfaction in helping authors shape their stories, in being part of something creative. Her phone lit up with a text from her mother. "Thanksgiving plans? Your father and I would love to have you and Emma." Sarah stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Her relationship with her parents had been strained since the divorce. They had loved Mark, had been shocked when she told them about his affair, and even more shocked when she decided to end the marriage. "People work through these things," her mother had said. "Marriage isn't supposed to be easy." As if Sarah had given up because things got hard, not because staying would have cost her the last shreds of her self-respect. "I'll check with Emma," she finally replied. The truth was, she'd been avoiding family gatherings. The last one had been her cousin's wedding, where relatives kept asking where Mark was, and her aunt had suggested that perhaps Sarah should have tried harder. That evening, Emma called. "Grandma texted me about Thanksgiving. Are you going?" Sarah sighed. "I don't know, honey. It might be awkward." "Mom, it's been almost a year. They miss you. And I miss you too. I was thinking of coming home that weekend." Home. Emma still called Mark's house home, even though Sarah no longer lived there. It was another small hurt in a year full of them. "Actually," Sarah said, making a decision, "why don't you come stay with me? We can go to Grandma and Grandpa's for dinner, but you can see my new place." There was a pause. "Yeah, that would be nice. Is there room for me, though?" "Of course there's room." There. Wasn't, not really, but Sarah would figure it out. She'd buy an air mattress, clear out some space. Having Emma stay with her felt important somehow. The week before Thanksgiving, Sarah got a call from her brother. "Just checking if you're really coming to Mom and Dad's," Michael said. "They're nervous about it." "Why would they be nervous?" "I'm not going to make a scene." "I know that. But this is the first holiday since everything happened. Dad's worried about saying the wrong thing. And Mom's been cleaning like a maniac, which is what she does when she's anxious." Sarah hadn't considered that her parents might be as uncertain about how to navigate this new reality as she was. "Tell them it'll be fine. Emma and I will be there." The night before Thanksgiving, Emma arrived with a duffel bag and a cautious smile. Sarah had spent the entire day getting the apartment ready, inflating the air mattress in the living room, buying Emma's favorite snacks, even putting up a few pictures she'd kept in boxes until now. "It's small," Emma said, looking around, "but it's nice. I like what you've done with it." They ordered pizza and sat on Sarah's couch, catching up properly for the first time in months. Emma talked about her classes, about a boy she'd been seeing. "It's not serious, Mom." About how she was thinking of switching her major from business to education. "Your father must love that idea," Sarah said, immediately regretting bringing Mark into the conversation. Emma shrugged. "He doesn't know yet. I wanted to talk to you first." The simple statement brought tears to Sarah's eyes. For so long, she'd felt like she was losing her daughter along with everything else. This small sign that Emma still valued her opinion meant more than Emma could know. The next day, they drove to her parents' house in silence. Sarah's stomach was in knots. As they pulled into the driveway, she took a deep breath. "Ready?" Emma squeezed her hand. "It's just dinner, Mom. We've got this." Her mother opened the door before they could knock, pulling Emma into a hug first, then hesitantly embracing Sarah. "I'm so glad you both came," she said, and Sarah could hear the genuine relief in her voice. Inside, the house smelled like turkey and pumpkin pie, exactly the same as every Thanksgiving Sarah could remember. Her father was in his armchair watching football, Michael and his wife Lisa were in the kitchen helping with the cooking, and their children were playing a board game on the floor. "Sarah," her father said, standing up awkwardly. He looked older than she remembered, or maybe she just hadn't been paying attention. He hugged her stiffly, then with more warmth. "It's good to see you." Dinner was less uncomfortable than Sarah had feared. They talked about Emma's college experience, Michael's new job, Lisa's volunteer work. No one mentioned Mark until Sarah's mother, pouring coffee after dessert, said, "I ran into Mark's mother at the grocery store last week." The table went quiet. Sarah could feel everyone looking at her, waiting for her reaction. "How is she?" Sarah asked calmly. "She's fine. She asked about you, actually. Said she misses seeing you." Sarah nodded, surprised by the lack of pain at hearing about her former mother-in-law. "She was always kind to me." Later, as Sarah was helping clear the dishes, her mother came to stand beside her at the sink. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "When you first told us about the divorce, I said some things I shouldn't have." Sarah kept rinsing a plate, not trusting herself to speak. I was thinking about my own marriage, about the hard times your father and I went through. But every marriage is different. Every situation is different. I should have supported your decision, not questioned it." Sarah put down the plate and turned to look at her mother. Really look at her. There were new wrinkles around her eyes. Her hair was grayer than Sarah remembered. "Thank you for saying that." Her mother wiped her hands on a dish towel. "We've missed you, Sarah. This house doesn't feel right without you in it regularly." "I've missed you too," Sarah admitted. And she had, despite the hurt, despite the distance. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in the passenger seat. Sarah glanced at her daughter's peaceful face and felt a wave of gratitude. Family was complicated. It could hurt you deeply, but it could also heal you in ways nothing else could. She hadn't lost her family in the divorce. The relationships had just changed, evolved, as all living things must. When they got back to the apartment, Emma sleepily made her way to the air mattress. "Thanks for today, Mom," she mumbled, already half asleep. It felt normal, you know? Like we're all going to be okay. Sarah stood in the doorway of her tiny living room, watching her daughter drift off to sleep. "Yeah," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Spring came to the city with a burst of color and energy that seemed to mirror Sarah's slowly evolving life. The publishing house had promoted her to senior editor after Diane moved to another company. Her apartment no longer felt temporary. She'd painted the walls a soft gray, bought actual furniture instead of the mismatched pieces she'd initially gathered, and even started a small herb garden on her balcony. "You look different," Michael commented during one of their now regular Sunday brunches. "Happier." Sarah stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "I feel different. Like I'm finally comfortable in my own skin." It was true. The paralyzing grief and shock of the divorce had gradually given way to something else. Not exactly happiness, but a quiet contentment, a sense of being present in her own life rather than merely getting through each day. "There's a guy at work who's been asking about you," Michael said with a hint of mischief in his voice. Sarah rolled her eyes. "Please tell me you're not trying to set me up." "James is a good guy. He's divorced too, has a teenage son. He works in the IT department." "I'm not ready for that," Sarah said automatically, though she wasn't entirely sure if that was still true. The thought of dating again terrified her, but occasionally, especially on quiet evenings alone, she found herself missing companionship. Michael didn't push the issue, but the next week, he conveniently invited her to a dinner party where James was also a guest. He was tall with kind eyes and a quiet laugh, and Sarah found herself enjoying their conversation about books and travel. He didn't ask about her divorce, and she appreciated that. "Would you want to get coffee sometime?" he asked as the evening was ending. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." Their coffee date turned into dinner the following week. James was easy to talk to, and his own experience with divorce gave him an understanding of her situation that was refreshing. He showed her pictures of his son, Alex, and listened attentively when she talked about Emma. "I was married for 15 years, he told her. "When it ended, I thought that was it for me. I'd had my chance at a relationship and failed. It took me a long time to realize that wasn't true." Sarah nodded, recognizing her own feelings in his words. "I'm still working on that part," she admitted. They began seeing each other regularly. Simple dates like walks in the park, movies, dinners at quiet restaurants. Sarah found herself looking forward to their time together, even as a part of her remained cautious, watchful for signs that this too might end in hurt. One evening, after they'd been dating for 2 months, James kissed her goodnight at her door. It wasn't their first kiss, but something about this one felt different, more significant somehow. Sarah pulled back, suddenly overwhelmed. "I'm sorry," she said. It's okay," James said gently. "We can take this as slow as you need." She appreciated his understanding, but later that night, alone in her apartment, she found herself crying for the first time in months. Not out of sadness, exactly, but from the complex tangle of emotions that came with opening herself up to someone new. She called Emma, needing to hear her daughter's voice. "Does it feel like you're betraying Dad?" Emma asked after Sarah explained her feelings. The question surprised her. "No, not really. It's more like, I'm afraid of making the same mistakes, of trusting the wrong person again. Mom, you and Dad were together for almost 20 years. I think you're allowed to be happy with someone else now." Emma's simple permission loosened something in Sarah's chest. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed to hear those words, especially from her daughter. The next time she saw James, she told him about her fears. They were sitting on a bench in the botanical gardens, surrounded by blooming flowers and the gentle hum of bees. "I understand," he said. "After my divorce, I was convinced I'd never let anyone get close again. It felt safer that way." "What changed?" He smiled. "I realized that living behind walls might protect you from pain, but it also keeps out all the good stuff. And eventually, that's no way to live." Sarah thought about the blue plates in her kitchen, about her newly painted walls, about the small choices she'd been making to reclaim her life. Perhaps this was just another step in that direction. "I'd like you to meet Emma," she said. "If you want to." His face lit up. "I'd love that." Emma came home for a weekend in May, and Sarah arranged for them all to have dinner together. She was nervous, watching Emma and James interact, but they seemed to get along well, finding common ground in their love of sci-fi movies and bad puns. "He's nice," Emma said later when they were alone. "He looks at you like you matter." The simple observation brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Because that was it, wasn't it? The feeling she'd been missing in those final years with Mark, the sense that she mattered, that she was seen. A few weeks later, James invited her to a barbecue at his house to meet his son, Alex. The 15-year-old was reserved at first, eyeing Sarah with thinly veiled suspicion, but by the end of the evening, he was showing her his photography collection and asking about her work at the publishing house. "He liked you," James said as they cleaned up after Alex had gone to bed. "He's a great kid," Sarah replied. "You've done a good job with him." James looked at her for a long moment. "I know we haven't been together that long, but I want you to know that I'm serious about us. About seeing where this goes." Sarah felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, but it was softer now, tempered by the genuine connection they'd built. "I'm serious too," she said, "but I need to keep taking it slow." "We have time," he said simply, and she believed him. Summer arrived with a heat wave and a series of changes. Emma decided to stay in the city for an internship, taking a small apartment with friends not far from Sarah. They began having weekly dinners, sometimes with James joining them, sometimes just the two of them. Sarah watched her daughter navigate her first serious relationship, her first real job, offering advice when asked but mostly just being there, a steady presence. Her relationship with her parents continued to heal as well. Her father had a health scare, a minor heart attack that turned out to be a wake-up call for the whole family. Sarah found herself driving to their house more often, helping her mother with shopping, accompanying her father to doctor's appointments. "Your father keeps asking when you're bringing James over again," her mother said during one such visit. "He enjoyed talking to him last time." It struck Sarah then how much had changed. A year ago, her parents had still been mourning the loss of Mark as a son-in-law. Now, they were asking about James, making space for this new person in their family circle. On a warm August evening, Sarah and James sat on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the city gold. Her herb garden had flourished, filling the air with the scent of basil and mint. Inside, Emma and Alex were arguing good-naturedly over a board game, their voices drifting through the open window. "I never expected this," Sarah said quietly. "After the divorce, I thought I was just going to be alone, focusing on work and Emma. I didn't think there would be this." James took her hand. "Life has a way of surprising you." She looked at their intertwined fingers, at the evidence of this unexpected new beginning. The fear wasn't gone completely. She suspected it never would be, but it had receded, making room for something else. Something that felt remarkably like hope. "Yes," she agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "It certainly does." As summer turned to fall, Sarah faced a new challenge at work. The publishing house had been acquired by a larger company, bringing both opportunities and uncertainties. Staff meetings became tense affairs filled with corporate jargon and vague promises about synergy and restructuring. "Do you think they'll let us go?" asked Tom, one of the junior editors who had become Sarah's mentee over the past few months. Sarah wished she had a reassuring answer. "I don't know, but I do know we've been doing good work. That has to count for something." In truth, the uncertainty weighed on her. She had finally found her footing in this job, had built relationships with authors and colleagues. The thought of starting over again made her stomach churn. She'd had enough fresh starts for 1 year. James listened patiently each evening as she vented her frustrations. "You could always come work with me," he joked one night over dinner. "I hear the IT department needs someone who can actually write coherent emails." Sarah laughed, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "Thanks, but I think we should probably maintain some professional boundaries. Besides, I'd hate to cramp your style. My style? I'm the guy who wears the same 3 button-downs on rotation. It was true. James wasn't flashy or particularly stylish. He was steady, reliable, kind, qualities Sarah had once taken for granted but now recognized as invaluable. Their relationship had deepened over the past months, settling into a comfortable rhythm of weeknight dinners, weekend outings with the kids, and quiet evenings together. The corporate restructuring came to a head in October when Sarah was called into a meeting with the new management team. She sat across from 3 people she barely knew, trying to keep her expression neutral as they reviewed her department's performance. "We've been impressed with your work, Sarah," said the woman who'd introduced herself as the new VP of Operations. "Particularly your ability to nurture new authors." Sarah nodded, waiting for the "but" that seemed inevitable. "We'd like to offer you a position as head of our new Emerging Voices imprint. It would mean more responsibility, a small team reporting to you, and of course, a salary increase." It wasn't what Sarah had expected. She'd been bracing for bad news, not a promotion. Thank you. Can I have some time to think about it?" The offer was both flattering and intimidating. Leading a team wasn't something she'd done before. During her marriage, she deliberately kept her career low-key, accommodating Mark's more demanding job, his frequent travel, his professional priorities. Now, there was no reason to hold back, and that realization was both liberating and terrifying. That evening, she called Emma to share the news. Her daughter's immediate enthusiasm was heartwarming. "Mom, that's amazing. You're going to be someone's boss." "Several someones, apparently," Sarah said. "I'm not sure I'm qualified." "Are you kidding? You ran Dad's entire life for years. You organized all those charity events. You've basically been managing people forever, just without the title or the pay." Emma's assessment made Sarah pause. It was true that she'd coordinated countless events, managed household staff, juggled multiple schedules. She had skills she'd never thought to put on a resume. When she told James about the offer, his reaction was similar to Emma's. "You're going to be great at this," he said with such conviction that Sarah almost believed it herself. "It would mean longer hours, more stress," she warned. "So, we'll figure it out. Relationships are about supporting each other through changes, right?" The simple statement touched something deep in Sarah. Her previous marriage had been built on carefully maintained roles and expectations. When circumstances changed, when she'd wanted to return to work after Emma started high school, when Mark's career had taken a new direction, the foundation had cracked. With James, there was a flexibility, a willingness to adapt that felt new. Sarah accepted the promotion, and the following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, training, and planning. She came home late most evenings, exhausted but exhilarated by the challenges. James adjusted without complaint, sometimes bringing dinner to her office, other times having a glass of wine waiting when she finally made it home. One particularly difficult day, after a tense budget meeting that had run hours over schedule, Sarah returned to find James asleep on her couch, a cold dinner on the coffee table. She stood there for a moment, taking in the scene. This man who had made space for her ambition, who didn't see her success as a threat to his own. She sat beside him, gently touching his shoulder. He blinked awake, smiling sleepily. "Hey, how was the meeting?" "Brutal," she admitted. "I'm sorry about dinner." "Don't be. That's what microwaves are for." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Did you at least win whatever argument you were having with the finance guys?" "I did, actually." She'd secured funding for a promising new author whose work didn't fit neatly into commercial categories. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. "That's my girl," James said, and the casual endearment wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Later that night, lying beside him in the darkness, Sarah thought about balance, how she'd always seen it as something rigid and precarious, like a scale where adding weight to one side inevitably meant taking from the other. Career or family, independence or partnership. But maybe it wasn't like that at all. Maybe balance was more fluid, more forgiving than she'd believed. The thought followed her into the next day, when she met Emma for lunch. Her daughter looked tired, the demands of her senior year taking their toll. "How do you do it all, Mom?" Emma asked, picking at her salad. "Work, relationship, everything?" Sarah considered the question carefully. Not perfectly anyway. Some days work gets more attention. Some days personal life does. But I'm learning that's okay. Dad always made it seem so easy," Emma said. and Sarah detected a note of criticism in her voice. His career, his social life, everything just worked. Sarah chose her words carefully. Your father is very good at projecting competence. But behind that, there were a lot of compromises, mostly made by other people. It was the closest she'd come to criticizing Mark to Emma, and she immediately wondered if she'd overstepped. But Emma just nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About how much you gave up. I made my choices, Sarah said gently. And now I'm making different ones. The new imprint launched in December with a small but enthusiastic reception. Sarah watched with pride as her team presented their first slate of authors to the company. The books were diverse, challenging, unlike anything the publisher had taken on before. This is your vision, the CEO said, raising a glass to Sarah at the launch party. You've brought something unique to this company. The compliment warmed her, but even more meaningful was the sight of James and Emma standing together across the room, chatting easily with one of the authors. They had come to support her, to witness this moment of professional achievement. Sarah moved through the crowd to join them, feeling the separate pieces of her life coming together in a way that finally felt right. January brought a heavy snowfall that blanketed the city in white. Sarah stood at her office window, watching the flakes swirl against the darkening sky, when her phone buzzed with a text from James. Alex is in the hospital. Don't worry, he's okay, but can you come? She grabbed her coat and rushed out, anxiety tightening her chest. At the hospital, she found James pacing in a small waiting room, his face drawn with worry. What happened? She asked, taking his hands in hers. Appendicitis. They've taken him into surgery. It's routine, the doctor said, but his voice broke, and Sarah pulled him into a hug. He's going to be fine, she assured him, though her own heart was racing. In the 10 months she'd known James, she'd grown to care deeply for his son, for his quiet intelligence, his dry sense of humor, the way he looked so much like his father when he concentrated. They waited together for 2 hours, making small talk that did little to mask their concern. Finally, a surgeon appeared to tell them the operation had gone well. James sagged with relief, and Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. They were allowed to see Alex briefly in recovery. He looked small and pale against the hospital sheets, and four in his arm, but he managed a weak smile when he saw them. Hey, Dad, he murmured, then his eyes shifted to Sarah. You came. The simple statement held a weight that Sarah felt in her chest. Of course I came, she said, squeezing his hand gently. Later, as Alex slept, James stepped out to make some calls. Sarah sat beside the bed, watching the steady rise and fall of the boy's chest. She realized with sudden clarity that she loved this child, not in the all-consuming way she loved Emma, but with a growing, genuine affection that had snuck up on her. When James returned, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You didn't have to stay, he said. I know you have that big meeting tomorrow. I want to be here, she replied simply. That night, as they took turns sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, Sarah thought about family, how it could expand in unexpected ways, how love wasn't limited to blood relations. She thought about Mark, who had missed Emma's high school graduation because of a business trip, and how different James was, canceling meetings without hesitation to be at his son's side. The hospital stay stretched to 3 days due to a minor infection. Sarah juggled work responsibilities remotely, stepping out of Alex's room for conference calls, answering emails during the quiet hours when both James and Alex were sleeping. Her team stepped up admirably in her absence, handling the day-to-day operations of the imprint. On the third evening, as they were preparing to take Alex home, James turned to Sarah. Move in with me, he said suddenly. Sarah blinked, taken aback by the unexpected proposal. What? I know it's fast, but these past few days, watching you with Alex, how you've been there for both of us. I don't want to waste any more time. I love you, Sarah. I want us to be a family. The word family hung in the air between them. Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions. Love, certainly, but also fear, hesitation, the memory of promises made and broken. I need some time to think, she said finally. This isn't just about us. There's Emma to consider, and your house is further from my office, and I understand, James said, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. No pressure. Just think about it. Sarah did think about it, turning the idea over in her mind during the next few weeks. She talked to Emma, who was surprisingly supportive. He makes you happy, Mom. That's what matters to me. She talked to her brother, who asked practical questions about finances and living arrangements. She even, in a moment of either courage or insanity, mentioned it to her mother during their weekly phone call. Do you love him? Her mother asked, cutting through all the logistics and hesitations. Yes, Sarah admitted. I do. Then the rest is just details. But before Sarah could give James her answer, life threw another curveball. Emma called one evening, her voice tight with anger and hurt. Dad's getting remarried. To Vanessa. Vanessa. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. The woman Mark had been having an affair with, the reason their marriage had ended. She'd been his assistant, 15 years younger than Mark, with a dazzling smile and ambition that matched his own. Oh, honey, Sarah said, her heart breaking for her daughter. I'm so sorry. He didn't even tell me himself. I found out from Uncle Steve. He said everyone's known for months. Emma's voice cracked. Did you know? No, Sarah said truthfully. She and Mark rarely communicated now, and when they did, it was through brief texts or emails about practical matters related to their divorce. Emma came over that night, curling up on Sarah's couch like she had as a child after a bad dream. I feel so stupid, she said. I knew they were dating, but I thought it was just, I don't know, a rebound or something. Sarah chose her words carefully. Your father cares about you very much, Emma. This isn't about you. But it is about you, Emma said fiercely. He cheated on you with her, and now he's marrying her like what he did wasn't wrong. Sarah sighed, stroking her daughter's hair. People make mistakes, honey. Even people we love. Your dad and I weren't happy for a long time before Vanessa came into the picture. It was a truth she'd never shared with Emma before, a small mercy intended to preserve her daughter's relationship with her father. But Emma was an adult now, capable of understanding that relationships were complex, that there were rarely clear villains and heroes in the messy business of human hearts. Are you okay? Emma asked, looking up at her mother with concern. About them getting married, I mean. Sarah was surprised to realize that she was. The news had shocked her, certainly, but the pain she might have expected wasn't there. I am actually. What your father does isn't my business anymore. What hurt was seeing Emma's pain, knowing that Mark's choices were still causing ripples that affected their daughter. Sarah held Emma until she fell asleep, then covered her with a blanket and quietly called James to explain why she wouldn't be coming over that night. Is there anything I can do? He asked, his voice warm with concern. Just knowing you're there helps, Sarah replied, and she meant it. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Emma in the kitchen, making coffee. I've been thinking, Emma said, handing her mother a steaming mug. About you and James. About him asking you to move in. Sarah raised her eyebrows, surprised. She hadn't told Emma about that. Alex mentioned it when we were texting last night. Emma explained. He's pretty excited about the idea. And how do you feel about it? Emma took a sip of her coffee, considering. I think you should do it. After seeing Dad move on so completely. I don't know. Life's short, right? You should be with someone who makes you happy. The simplicity of Emma's perspective cut through the tangle of Sarah's own thoughts. She'd been overthinking it, worrying about logistics and timing, when the essential truth was much simpler. She loved James, and he loved her. That evening, she went to James's house for dinner. Alex was there, still moving carefully after his surgery, but looking much better. They ate lasagna that James had made, talked about their days, fell into the easy rhythm they'd established over months of shared meals and experiences. After dinner, as Alex disappeared upstairs to finish homework, Sarah turned to James. Yes, she said simply. His brow furrowed in confusion, then cleared as understanding dawned. Yes, you'll move in? Sarah nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Yes, I'll move in. Yes, I want us to be a family. James's face lit up with a joy so pure it made Sarah's heart skip. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes. You've made me the happiest man alive, he whispered. Don't get too excited, Sarah warned with a smile. I have a lot of books, and I'm not getting rid of any of them. I'll build you more shelves, he promised, and in that simple offer, Sarah heard everything she needed to know about their future together. Moving day arrived in March, with spring just beginning to soften the city's edges. Sarah stood in her empty apartment, running her fingers along the kitchen counter where her blue plate had sat for over a year. The space felt smaller somehow, now that it was stripped of her belongings. yet it held memories that she wouldn't forget. Her first real home that was entirely her own. "Ready?" James asked from the doorway, cardboard box in hand. Sarah nodded, taking one last look around. "Ready." James's house, their house now, was a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. It had a yard with actual grass, unlike Sarah's concrete balcony, and a kitchen with enough counter space for serious cooking. Most importantly, it had room for all of them. A bedroom for Alex, a guest room that would be Emma's whenever she stayed, and a study that James had converted into a reading nook for Sarah, complete with built-in bookshelves just as he'd promised. The first few weeks of cohabitation brought expected adjustments. Sarah had grown accustomed to her own space, her own routines. Now she had to navigate around Alex's backpack left in the hallway, James's habit of leaving coffee mugs in odd places, the constant negotiation of shared bathrooms and kitchen duties. "You're sighing again," James said one evening as they did the dishes together. "What's on your mind?" Sarah hadn't realized she was sighing. "Nothing really. Just getting used to the new normal." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a big change. If there's anything I can do to make it easier." "You're already doing it," Sarah assured him, and it was true. Both James and Alex had made considerable efforts to welcome her, to make space for her in their lives, literally and figuratively. Alex had been particularly thoughtful, clearing a shelf in the bathroom for her things without being asked, helping move her furniture, even rearranging his video game setup so she could use the living room TV for her favorite cooking shows. There had been awkward moments too, Sarah accidentally walking in on Alex changing, disagreements about noise levels after certain hours, but they were working through them with honesty and respect. Emma visited for a weekend in April, bringing with her news that she'd been accepted to graduate school in a city just an hour away. "I could come home on weekends if I wanted to," she said over dinner, watching for Sarah's reaction. "That would be wonderful," Sarah replied, touched that Emma still considered this new place home. After Emma left, Sarah found herself thinking about how family could reshape itself, how new connections could form alongside the old ones. She thought about Mark and Vanessa, about their upcoming wedding that Emma was reluctantly preparing to attend. She thought about her parents, who had visited the new house and pronounced it very nice, which from her mother was high praise indeed. One Saturday morning in May, as Sarah was shopping at the farmer's market near their house, she heard a familiar voice call her name. She turned to find Mark standing there, looking both surprised and uncomfortable. "Sarah," he said again, shifting a grocery bag from one arm to the other. "I didn't know you lived in this neighborhood." "We moved recently," she replied, the "we" feeling natural on her tongue. "James's house is just a few blocks away." Mark nodded, a flicker of something, regret, curiosity, crossing his face. "Emma mentioned you were living with someone. She speaks highly of him." "He's a good man," Sarah said simply. She looked at Mark, really looked at him for the first time since their divorce was finalized. He appeared well, perhaps a bit older around the eyes, but essentially the same man she had spent 2 decades with. Yet standing before him now, she felt none of the anger or hurt that had once consumed her. Just a quiet recognition of a shared past and gratitude for the path that had led her here. "I hear congratulations are in order," she added. "On your engagement." Mark had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Yes, well, thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I hope Emma will come to the wedding. She's been distant." Sarah felt a familiar protectiveness rise within her. "Give her time. This hasn't been easy for her." "I know." Mark sighed. "I handled things badly, with everyone, including you." It was the closest thing to an apology he had ever offered. Sarah nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without needing more. "We all did the best we could with what we knew at the time." They parted ways with awkward smiles and promises to stay in touch about Emma. Promises they both knew would likely amount to occasional texts and emails. As Sarah walked home, bags of fresh produce in hand, she felt a sense of closure she hadn't realized she was still seeking. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, James chopping vegetables while Sarah marinated chicken and Alex set the table, she recounted the encounter. "How did it feel seeing him?" James asked, his tone carefully neutral. Sarah considered the question. "Easier than I expected. Like running into an old colleague more than an ex-husband." James nodded, relief visible in the set of his shoulders. "I'm glad. Not that I was worried or anything." Sarah laughed, bumping her hip against his playfully. "Liar. You were totally worried." Maybe a little, he admitted with a grin. The guy was married to you for almost 20 years. That's not nothing. No, it's not nothing, Sarah agreed. But it's in the past. This, she gestured around the kitchen, at the three of them moving in easy synchronicity. This is my present. And my future. Summer brought Emma home from college for good, her belongings packed into boxes that temporarily took over the guest room. She'd be staying with them until graduate school started in August, a prospect that both delighted and terrified Sarah. She worried about Emma feeling like a visitor in this house that wasn't her childhood home, about potential friction between Emma and Alex, about disturbing the delicate balance they'd all worked to establish. Her fears proved largely unfounded. Emma and Alex developed a sibling-like rapport, alternately teasing and defending each other. They discovered shared interests in photography and obscure indie bands, spent evenings arguing good-naturedly about movies and books. It's weird, Emma confessed to Sarah one afternoon as they worked in the garden James had helped Sarah plant. I always wanted a brother or sister when I was little. Now I sort of have one at 22. Sarah smiled, digging her hands into the warm soil. Family doesn't always look the way we expect it to. I know. I'm just glad you found this, Emma said, gesturing toward the house where James and Alex could be seen through the window, apparently engaged in a mock sword fight with kitchen utensils. You deserve to be happy, Mom. The simple statement brought tears to Sarah's eyes. So do you, sweetheart. Emma was quiet for a moment, focusing on the seedlings she was planting. I think I might be, Happy, I mean. Despite everything with Dad and school stress and all of it. I've been watching you this past year, how you rebuilt your life after everything fell apart. It's shown me that even when things don't work out the way you planned, you can still create something good. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. She had spent so much time worrying about how the divorce had affected Emma, fearing that the broken marriage had damaged her daughter's view of relationships and trust. To hear that Emma had instead found hope and resilience in watching her journey, it was a gift Sarah hadn't expected. That evening, they hosted a dinner party to celebrate Emma's graduation. Sarah's parents came, along with Michael and his family, and a few of Emma's close friends. The house was full of laughter and conversation. The dining table extended to its full length and surrounded by a motley collection of chairs borrowed from neighbors. As Sarah moved through the crowded rooms, refreshing drinks and making introductions, she caught glimpses of the connections forming around her. Her father deep in conversation with James about fishing, her mother helping Alex with a crossword puzzle, Emma showing Michael's children how to use her camera. Family, not defined by blood or legal documents, but by love and choice and the everyday decision to show up for one another. Later, after the guests had gone and the dishes were washed, Sarah found herself alone on the back porch. James came out to join her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching fireflies blink in the gathering darkness. What are you thinking about? James asked eventually. Sarah took a sip of her wine, considering. I was thinking about paths, she said. About how sometimes the hardest turns lead you exactly where you need to be. James nodded, taking her hand in his. I'm glad your path led you here. Me too, Sarah said softly. The night air was warm against her skin, carrying the scent of the jasmine she'd planted along the fence. From inside the house came the muffled sounds of Emma and Alex arguing over a video game, their voices rising and falling in the familiar rhythm of family life. Sarah leaned her head against James's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. The road that had brought her here had been difficult, marked by loss and grief and moments of profound uncertainty. But sitting here now, surrounded by the life they were building together, she wouldn't have chosen any other way.